when I walked into the intensive care unit where he had been transported, he actually had a stroke when he saw me walking. So right before my eyes, his whole face melted to one side. And I don't know if you've ever experienced witnessing a stroke, particularly from your favorite person in the world at the time. It's a very shocking experience, a very traumatic experience, one that I don't wish upon on anyone. I felt totally powerless. He lost the power of speech. He didn't look like himself. It's a very, very tough sight. And of course, you're faced with the imminent possibility of death, especially because he just had a heart attack. So in that moment, something happened, an intervention of sorts of life, where I felt like I was looking right into my future. And that question intuitively came to me as I witnessed my dad going through this. Is he going to survive his success?
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Our guest today, Charlene Gisele, is a former big law litigator turned high performance coach and the founder of the unique Charlene Gisele coaching method. Charlene empowers high achieving professionals to prevent and recover from burnout without having to sacrifice their career. The power of her approach is not to work less, it's about recovering more, which is why her expertise has been featured in major publications and is sought after by world-leading organizations and professionals. Charlene, welcome to the podcast.
What a beautiful intro. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here with you. Although just a little bit sad that we didn't get a chance to do that when I was down under in Australia just a few months ago.
That would have been nice. Yeah, you could have come out
Oh,
to our
yes.
property here. And I don't get to do anywhere near as many in-person interviews as I would enjoy. I've done a few, but yeah.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah, I rope in my son who lives on the property here. He's a professional videographer. So he sets it all up for us and mics us up and does all that, so yeah.
How
And
convenient.
they come out and they turn out real good. He sets the lighting up and it's great. Yeah. All right. So I'd like to start with Burnout, which you work on. And there's a couple of quotes from you. And one of them I just want to read out first. It says, the true measure of sustainable success is whether or not we survive our success. How about you expand on that and talk about, and also too, I want to know, you specialize in burnout. Is that because you have experienced burnout personally?
Great questions. So the story begins a few decades ago, really, all the way back to when I was a little girl. I wanted to be just like my daddy. I was daddy's little girl, always have been, still am. And I wanted to be just like him when I grew up. He was ambitious, he was extremely successful. I remember his office being my favorite playground. And I thought to myself, whatever it takes, I want to be just like my father. So I studied really, really hard. I went to law school in Cambridge University, which was a huge challenge because English was not my first language, of course, and I learned English very late in life. I was such a conscientious, grade A student. On paper, everything was going brilliantly, got a job at a top American law firm, became a litigator, tick, 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 right? And of course, Daddy was very proud. But what I didn't realize along the way is I was crushing my intuition and really increasing and heightening my anxiety. So just to give you context, I used to work as a litigator on average, I would say anywhere between 85 to 95 hours a week. I would be, and I would be obsessed with it. So again, here, I'm not saying it in a blameful way vis-a-vis my ex-law firm or anything like that, because I'm the one who was asking for more work, right? I was a total workaholic. And it's like everything else in my life sort of lost purpose or importance. My health, my well-being, my passions. I was really intuitive as a child, always into arts and craft, always listening to music, always in nature, playing around, a bit of a feral child, actually, if I dare say. And then I had this very comfortable AC lifestyle, glamorous apartment, fancy office, working, making a lot of money, chasing status, chasing promotion. And it was intoxicating. It was really addictive, actually. And I wanted more. I wanted more of it all. And I'm the one to blame for that, no one else really. But what happened was that even though I was married at the time, I quickly had to navigate a divorce because my pace of working made a family home totally unsustainable. I was a stepmom and I couldn't really operate well as a stepmom or as a wife. So my whole life sort of fell apart. I was diagnosed with clinical insomnia, with general anxiety disorder. And you know what my first thought was? I can just work more now. I'm insomniac, so I can just build more hours during the night. Yay, right? This was the mindset that I had.
Have you seen the American TV show Suits?
I have not. I
Oh,
have not
just
because it's my life, I believe, from what I heard. So I felt like I didn't need more of that. I've lived it.
my wife's watching it again at the moment for the second time, and I
Okay.
occasionally sit down for 10 or 15 minutes and it's just what you're describing. But you actually a little bit more into it than they are, even with wow.
It's very intense. And honestly, I would have continued to do so for decades and more if it wasn't for the fact that one day, as I was in the office and it was Monday morning, my mother called and she knew not to do that. So, very unusual for her to ring in my office. And she said, Sweetie, I'm sorry to bother you at work, but your father on his way to work had a burnout driven heart attack this morning. And I'm so ashamed to this day to admit that. But my first thought was, I'm doing what I'm doing because my father wanted me to. And I believe he would want me to keep on working. I believe that if he could talk to me right now, he would want me to stay and do what I do best, which is work. And that's what I did. I stayed and I didn't fly home. When my mom called again, it was Friday night, and she said, This time, sweetie, we don't think he's going to make the night, so you really want to come home. And I did. And when I walked into the intensive care unit where he had been transported, he actually had a stroke when he saw me walking. So, right before my eyes, his whole face melted to one side. And I don't know if you've ever experienced witnessing a stroke, particularly from your favorite person in the world at the time. It's a very shocking experience, a very traumatic experience, one that I don't wish upon on anyone. I felt totally powerless. He lost the power of speech. He didn't look like himself. It's a very, very tough sight. And of course, you're faced with the imminent possibility of death, especially because he just had a heart attack. So in that moment, something happened, almost, an intervention of sorts of life where I felt like I was looking right into my future. And that question intuitively came to me as I witnessed my dad going through this. Is he going to survive his success? In this moment, fighting for his life, was he still a very wealthy man? Was he still very successful? Did he have all his properties and assets and investments and companies and clients? Yes. But was he going to make the night? That was not sure at all. So, in that moment, what was the benefit of his success as daughter, right? And I think as parent, we have a tendency to say, and I've heard my father say that to me for years, I would die for you. I would do anything for you. I would give up my life for you. But in that moment, what I wanted my father to do was to live for me. That's the only thing that I wanted him to do. I didn't want him to die for me. I wanted him to live for me. And I think as parents or as children, it's really important to ask ourselves the question, is the way we work sustainable? Are we building up a success that we're on a path to surviving? Or is that success literally killing us? And that's not me being hyperbolic or wanting to be dramatic. Sometimes success actually kills us, right? So that's where it comes from.
Guys, if you're on a path of developing your intuition, and I know you are, that's why you're listening here, then the Neurovisor is a tool worth checking out. It uses light and sound to guide your brain into deeper states of awareness, helping you quiet the noise, tap into your inner knowing, and strengthen your intuitive muscle. And who doesn't want that? There's no pills, no fluff, just 11 minutes a day to reset your mind and reconnect with your instincts. I've bought myself one last Christmas and I've added it to my daily practice, and the shifts are real. This is not a paid ad, but if you use the link in the show notes for more information, I do receive a small percentage of the purchase price. I highly recommend you check it out. Wow, that's a pretty full-on story. I've listened to a few podcasts of yours, and I haven't heard that before. I mean, I haven't obviously listened to enough of your podcasts, but yeah, that's pretty full-on and serious. And I appreciate you sharing that because I'm sure it's touches a raw spot here and there. Burnout prevention for those who come to you for coaching help, etc. I can see the benefits for it. And when we talked last time, you said you get a reasonable amount of male clients.
Oh, yes, yes. In fact, predominantly so for many years, there's been a little bit of a shift lately where I get a lot of, I would say, type A female, or dare I say, women who behave like men in the workplace, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
my typical clientele is very type A, very ambitious, very career driven, right? So if we remove the gender for a moment and we don't think with the sort of polarity of female or male, the archetype is very driven. So I'm female, but I'm very male-like in my mindset, my attitude, and my approach to work. When I said I wanted to become my father, I quite literally became my father. So I'm extremely hardworking. I'm not necessarily a homemaker. You won't really catch me doing things that are often, and I apologize for any societal cliche here, but more often associated with female-like or feminine-like task or chores. I'm the one that's gonna work until midnight and plan and organize and provide and think about the finances. That's the way I'm designed. And a lot of the females that I have attracted over the years are and females that do act a little bit like men in the workplace or even in the household. And I say that with all my love because I'm one of them. So the reason this is interesting to me is because I initially started working with men because the men that heard my story all identified as either the father figure who was the story of my father because they are facing a cardiovascular incident or they have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or cancer or they've lost a father through burnout. So I did attract initially a lot of very, very ambitious men, traders, bankers, lawyers, mostly white collar professional that actually heard that story and resonated. And especially the marriage piece as well. A lot of the men that I work with come to me saying, listen, my marriage is hanging by a thread. If I don't change something, I don't think my wife is going to stick around. And that really touches me deeply because I lost a marriage to burnout. And, I'm pleased to say I'm really happily married now and I'm so grateful. And with hindsight, I can see that it was really meant to happen because now I'm with this extraordinary man that I adore and I have for many years. But it's heartbreaking. Anyone who's been navigating a divorce, especially when children are involved, which was my case, is absolutely heartbreaking and it's devastating. And for many type A's achievers, it does feel like a failure, right? I'm not saying it is, and I'm not labeling it as a failure, but I can absolutely say that from my firsthand experience being in court 3 times because I was married in 3 jurisdictions and getting your paperwork done to have that divorcee stamps does feel like a failure, right? At the time. And then
Mm.
there is the financial consequences and the emotional consequences and the status and the ego gets bruised and all of it in between. And even going to networking event for high status men is not easy when saying, how is your wife or where is your wife? And you really, the truth is you're going through divorce proceedings or you recently separated or you're looking for a new flat because you lost your house, right? So that affects many of my male clients. And for many of my male clients, I become a confident, right? I become someone that can hold space and be neutral and actually also rekindle a little bit of that feminine energy. So, although I do behave predominantly in my day-to-day life like a man in terms of the mindset and the psychology, I am very feminine in nature, and that's where my intuition comes in. So, in my work as a clinical hypnotherapist and burnout advisor, I bring on the feminine intuition to very masculine roles and to very masculine challenges, right? This overworking, this workaholism. And I believe that really adds a layer of,
So very interesting hearing you say all that. And it makes me happy that you understand who you are because you may have remembered or may not have remembered on the Google form I got you to fill out and send back to me. There was one little bit down the bottom and it said, optional, you can pop in your date of birth here because I study an ancient form of Chinese medicine and it
yes.
describes basically people's personality. And you've described yourself beautifully. I was, from what I looked up on my chart, it was like, like, yeah, there you go. From our talk we had a couple of weeks ago for half an hour, I picked up, obviously your type A type sort of thing, but it's, yeah, you understand yourself beautifully, and that's what more can you do? That's
I would
beautiful.
love to hear more of your insights on my chart. And I'm very open about my age too. So I do like the fact that I have 6, 7, 8, 8. I always like the sort of numbers in my date of birth. But yeah, if you have anything to share about that, I'm really happy to hear it publicly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was short of having it in front of me to read out the specific bits. It's because I'm we're all selfish, and so I understand my birth numbers very well because of me. Yours are different, and to be very honest with you, men that have your numbers used to scare me. Used to. Don't anymore because I understand them now. Because of the aggressiveness of them. And I'm not that way. And I now understand where it comes from. And because my brother is how you are, but to a much more full on extent, like way more. He's like you tripled. And he had a burnout in his mid 30s. He was in hospital. He had Ross River fever. He had this. He had that. He had everything. Basically, the doctors had no idea what was wrong with him, and he used to work 16 hours a day and like physically very hard. And he ended up in the hospital, and couldn't leave his hospital bed for a week. He was shot, and yeah, and he's 12 years older than me, and he's always watched over me as my guardian and my protector, and always been extremely helpful and generous to me. But I would watch him interact with other people, and it was a little bit scary. And then as a firefighter, there's a more than a handful of firefighters who were attracted over to that. And so I joined there at 19 and I was young and green and I wasn't worldly wise. And there was these older guys who were in that type A type sort of what you would relate to personality. And they scared the heck out of me for a long time. Were to the point where I didn't like being around people like that. But now that I've, probably 8 or 9 years ago started studying this, I can see beyond it and it all makes sense. And now it's like, oh, the things I was afraid of before aren't there. They just appear to be there. And it's sort of like, oh, so I understand myself so much better and I understand other people so much better. And I realize
Wow.
where they're coming from and how awesome we all are. And there's no one to be afraid of. We're all just, we all see things differently. We do things differently. Whatever. So it's, yes, you have a very strong personality and it serves you well. And
And
you
you can see
recognize it.
that in the numbers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I find that
yeah,
fascinating. I'm
yeah.
not very well versed at all in any of this
And none of
numbers.
this stuff is all science. It's gone back. like many, like 5 or 10,000 years into China, where people didn't relocate. They were born in a village and they stayed there. And hundreds of Chinese scientists started studying personality habits based on birth date, based on facial features. So over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, they compiled data. If you had a nose this sort of shape or ears this sort of shape, if you were born on this date, all they documented everything. And I felt, and they're not like us here in the West, where we hoard our information and we protect it and we copyright it. They shared their information with the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And they were able to compile this massive amount of information. So it's not woo woo, it's steak on the plate, it's fact. If you're born on this date in this 9 year cycle, you because it just goes around in these cycles. This is the type of personality in general you'll have, and then they'll look at people's facial features, the shape of the eyes and the eyebrow and the whole face, the ears, everywhere, and they've just put this information together. And I haven't studied it to the point where I could give someone a reading. I was sort of at the edge of that 5 or 6 years ago, but I've sort of let it drop off a bit. And you if you don't use it, you lose it a little bit. But I very much understand my numbers from the birth date, and it taught me so much more about who I am, and what I do. And yeah, so I'm just happy
Yeah.
that you've sort of able to hit the nail on the head at your age and realize who you are, what you are, and be happy with it, because it's we can mold ourselves, and we all we have bits that we enjoy, bits we don't enjoy. Well, the bits we don't enjoy are there to help us get through, to help us have experiences that will help us grow and understand and learn who we are. So, yeah.
Yes, and I think it's really important to know your type. And that's really important for the men in your audience to know their types, because I explore the theme of burnout in two main aspects. And I think that's not often talked about enough. There is phase one, which is the recovery, the intervention, right? So that's when it's very acute. So typically that's manifesting in what I call one of the 3Ds. So I call that the 3Ds of burnout, which is a sort of mapping system, very simple, but D for diagnosis. So you just had a healthcare medical diagnosis, often related to metabolic health condition. The other D is divorce. Your marriage is falling apart. And the third D is death. So either you've witnessed somebody's death or imminent death, or you actually get a sense for the first time of your own mortality, of the fact that you're playing with fire. And that for years and years and years, without you realizing so, you were trading your life and the years in your life for money, status, and power. So those realization is part one of what I do. And typically those interventions, they're not 9 to 5. The house is on fire, right? Quite literally in their world and their lives. So it's chaos, it's tough, it's even as far sometimes as escape fantasy, so wanting to tap out. So I have many male clients, and that's very specific to men actually, fantasizing about ways to no longer be around. So I've had so many male clients that contact me after fearing for their own life, in the sense of on the Thursday, they will call their attorney and check that all their wills is in order and their life insurance is in order. And then on Friday, knowing that they haven't slept for 3 days, they'll hit the road and they'll go driving, hoping they will never arrive. Right. So that's a classic example, and it's not uncommon at all. Now, the person is not deliberately planning their suicide or buying the gun or buying the pill, right? So it's not actually planning it, but it's taking very reckless actions that increase the odds of you potentially dying, and finding a sort of peace and release in that. So that particular story is an actual story that happened. And on the Saturday morning when my client woke up and he had arrived at final destination and realized he was still alive, and he not only didn't kill himself but also didn't kill anyone on the road, because that was quite, in his word, even selfish to think that, not just because of the family but also the fact that he could have, injured or, God forbid, killed someone on the road if he had an accident. That totally freaked him out. The fact that his mind was so dark that he was actually contemplating finding relief and peace in having a car crash was so terrifying that he Googled me and found me for a burnout intervention. So that's the kind of request and interventions that I get. And it's typically something has happened, the storm hit, right? So that's phase one, that's the intervention. Phase two, after a lot of work and deep dive and hypnotherapy and strategy, is what I call the prevention. And that's what's interesting because it's almost like a maintenance program. And if I speak from my experience, that is a lifetime. Why do I say that? That doesn't mean working with me for a lifetime. It means implementing the tools that we've developed for a lifetime, right? I love when my clients, and I say this with all my love, I love when they come to me, but I love when they go because it means I've done great work, right? And they're empowered and they've got the tools, and that's a toolkit that they can use and a map that they can use for the rest of their life. But it's important to know that it's not a one and done, right? Once you've recovered from burnout, you are always going to be burnout prone. Unless there are exceptions to the rules, unless there's been very specific sets of very specific circumstances, but it's rather unusual. At least in my experience, I've been doing this now for over 7.5 years of day in, day out burnout intervention every single day. So I've seen all shapes and forms of burnout worldwide across the whole globe, in Australia, in Asia, in the US, in Europe. There is a predisposition. So we need to put boundaries in place. And the reason I say that is because I live on a daily basis with the understanding and the awareness that just because I am a burnout recovered former workaholic, I will always be burnout prone, meaning need to put boundaries around my own sets of behavior because I'm a recovered addict, right? And that's important to accept, and that's a big acceptance piece. And for me, my substance of choice was not alcohol or drugs, it was work. And I sincerely believe that it is actually one of the most addictive substances in the world.
Yeah, and your numbers are more prone to addiction of anything than other numbers. Yeah, and it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. It's just we all have our ups and downs with our personality traits, and like you're saying, yeah, it's addiction to anything is you're slightly more prone than others. So yeah,
Well, it's an intensity thing, right?
yeah.
I believe that when you're high octane as a person, right, you're really ambitious, you're really driven, that it's a really nice package, but it comes with a
Okay,
price to,
and
right.
it would potentially, do you ever notice that you get frustrated more than others? Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that frustration's another wonderful feature. Yeah.
So I loved, and I'm really happy to be candid about that because, whenever I teach meditation or breath work or hypnotherapy, there is almost a presumption at first that I'm a very chilled person and I'm naturally very composed and calm, and I have become it, right? And I have those qualities, but only because I've developed them to counteract my fire personality and my very anger prone and frustration prone and demanding and tough to be around personality, which I'm hyper aware of. And I've learned to love it and nurture it because I know what it needs and I know the tools. So, yes, I can be all of that and be a meditation teacher and know how to now down regulate my nervous system and calm down my frustration. So I'm a lot less reactive than I was decades ago. I'm a lot more composed, but again, I will never be a sort of easy-go-lucky type of walk in the park person. I take things very seriously and at heart. Hence, I have a lot of tools in my toolkit. I like to think of, I'm Mary Poppins of wellness, right? You have a lot of tools in my bags. My clients tell me, I'm a tough person to work with. I have many, many problems. Like my life is this, is that, and it's completely fucked, and I'm overwhelmed, and I've got you. I
Okay.
have a laundry list of problems that I had to solve. So I
It's
get it.
interesting. Earlier, you were talking about that, the gentleman, like, and he's fantasizing about taking his life and that. And probably about 35 years ago, I heard the saying that was written probably 150 years ago. Most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And I know when I heard that, I immediately at that time thought of my father because he was living that sort of life. And he was a blue collar worker, and life sucked. So because life sucked, he sucked down the alcohol and it didn't make for a wonderful family life for us. But at his funeral, his younger brother shared some info with us, and we sort of knew a bit about stuff, but he shared some extra stuff about what happened when their mum passed away when dad was 11 and a half. She got hit by a drunk driver when she was on a bicycle. And just won't go into the story, but yeah, you started to realize like, oh, wow. And then that happened, and then this happened, and that happened. It was this chain of events that yeah, it would lead you into a life that wasn't that wonderful. And he was just constantly, because my mum would say occasionally when dad would get extra drunk, and she'd say, "Oh, he's all melancholy today. It's the anniversary of when his mother died. I don't know what's wrong with him." Like, oh, I'm like, oh, okay, like, and but he never talked to us about it. Like he never ever shared anything about it. The only reason I knew it was because mum told me about it. He never ever shared it. So yeah, and I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's not what I want to be. And then when I started looking into intuition, and I thought, man, if men could just make one better decision a day because they were developing their intuition, their life wouldn't be so desperate. They would feel better about themselves because they were just making that better decision. And because they were like that, they'd be nicer to be around because they wouldn't be as grumpy as often. And they might get promoted in their job. They'd be happier. Their partner, their children would be happier. Their work colleagues would be happier because, every day they're making one better decision because they've got this invisible benevolent force that they've finally tuned into and they're listening to and is giving them intuitive information. Nothing, amazing. There's no, but they're just genuinely able to have more confidence in themselves. And I just felt men would lead lives that weren't quietly desperate if they could develop their intuition. So that's, hence the path I'm on and the podcast, etc. So
And I'm so glad you've shared that because this is what called me to contact you. I love the fact that you specifically had a male driven community or that your audience was focused on men's health because I believe there is still a tendency for mostly women to seek psychological help. It's easier, dare I say, for female in general to go and talk to a therapist or a psychologist, to a psychiatrist or a counselor, or even a girlfriend or a mother or an aunt or an auntie or a cousin, because there is a sort of a girl-like thing about being tribal and sharing, and we're just a little bit more attuned to sharing very private, intimate, emotional things with less boundaries, stigma, and judgment. But what makes me a little special and why I thought, is because I have been in men's circles my whole life. I was brought up by this very, very strong male figure, and I hanged out with my dad's friends who were very ambitious, successful, powerful men when I was growing up. And then I went to, in elite university and was again a minority and then working as a litigator in oil and gas at an American law firm, you can only imagine that I was also a minority being a female. So I've accessed many doors, many meetings, many boardrooms with many men. And I've had more men contacts in terms of friends, coworkers, advisors, mentors than any average woman that I know. And so that puts me in a very unique position in terms of being familiar with the male psyche and understanding that there is a subtlety and a nuance with the approach of working with a man who is navigating a crisis, right? A woman will want to be seen and heard and acknowledged and talk about her challenges. A man is a lot more solution orientated, is not willing to open and share for the sake of it, but wants needs to create a solution and a framework with specific tool to achieve a given goal. And that's the main reason why a lot of men are turned off by psychologists, especially female psychologists, who approach the given situation with a feminine frame of mind. And that leads to not feeling powerful, feeling vulnerable, and not feeling comfortable to share. Whereas the men that I surround myself with and within my inner circle, so to speak, and my clients, see me at first as obviously a woman who thinks like a man, and therefore they can open up and be seen. And then I use my feminine intuition to do the work that needs to be done. So it's quite a powerful place in terms of getting the work done.
Awesome. I'd just like to move on now, like something else that you do offer, which we haven't talked about yet, is hypnotherapy. Tell us about
Oh,
that.
yes. Oh, I'd love to talk about that. Well, that's particularly relevant to intuition. And there are two techniques in particular that I am happy to offer as a little gift or a little tool to your audience today that are really just based on intuition. So those are techniques that we learn as clinical hypnotherapists, and they're powerful if you work with a hypnotherapist, but you can develop it by yourself and do it. So I'm just going to give some cues and examples. The first one is actually called automatic writing. Are you familiar with that?
I have heard of that, and I'm just going to, before you get into either of them, if
Yes?
someone's driving in the car listening to this, is either of these going to be potentially something they should wait to listen to when they're not driving or not?
I'm just going to explain it. No, no,
Right.
no.
Okay.
That's really, really great of you to think of it, but I'm not going to go in the trance state now
Okay.
because it would
Yeah. No
need
worries.
a whole
That's
setup.
fine. Yeah. Yeah. No,
But
that all good.
yes,
Keep going.
very, very good reminder. So let's maybe address that point first. So hypnotherapy, especially clinical hypnotherapy, which is what I practice, which is very different from entertainment hypnotist. So that let's just first draw that distinction. So if you're looking at shows where people are turned into chicken and octopus, that's not clinical hypnotherapy. That's entertainment hypnotist. They may or may not have clinical background, most likely not, and they are not pursuing a client or patient well-being goal, hence it being potentially not very aligned with the person's well-being, hence my being not that excited because A, it's not good for our reputation as clinical hypnotherapists because I work very ethically to achieve the well-being goal of my client and they do it for entertainment purposes, right? So that's the first thing to distinguish. The second thing is that some of the tools like trance state, which is the basis of hypnotherapy, which I know sounds really scary. Trance state, what is that? It's actually a state that we all navigate multiple times a day. You know, when you're walking almost automatically and you're almost in that state where you could experience a sense of flow or maybe disassociation, or you're so absorbed into mesmerizing a sunset, for instance. That's a really good example. You can achieve a trance-like state on your own, right? You're so absorbed in something. Somebody's talking and you're not hearing, not because you're having a hearing difficulty, but because you're so absorbed into an immersive experience. So a trance state is being that present, right? Now, as clinical hypnotherapists, we induce a trance state. So that phase is called the inductment, right? So we induce that through breath work, meditation, visualization, and very specific language and cues. So that's phase one. And then we do the work to work towards achieving the goal that we set for the session and the program. So it's very targeted. Unlike meditation, which doesn't have by definition or by purpose or by raison d'être a purpose or an attached goal, right? Other than the dropping into your being. Clinical hypnotherapy is very goal orientated, which is, surprise, surprise, why I like it. So it's very targeted. And another reason why I like it is because I'm rather impatient and it's very fast, it's very effective. So it's very, very attractive to very impatient folks like me. It's a fast track. So what you can achieve in, I would say, traditional talk therapy, you can usually achieve in clinical hypnotherapy in a third of the time, because you work so deeply with the subconscious and you don't need to go through the talk and the stories of why this and that happened, because you just go there in the event that your subconscious allows me to access. We take it, we work with it, and we reinstall the state that is the desirable state that we're looking to feel. Okay, so example of what hypnotherapy works really well for is general anxiety, burnout, insomnia, pain management, phobia, birthing without medication or with least amount of pain, fertility, libido, and even confidence. So it's quite wide. I would say my top 3 most often booked challenges to solve are relating to sleep, so insomnia, and or addiction, substance, work, smoking, alcohol, and or pain management, right? So those are very, very common. And the reason it's sufficient because you just work in a state that is not your high octane intellectual self, right? So somebody with that personality, very high strung type A, is very intellectual, very analytical, very skeptical, very guarded, right? And that actually can be a deterrence in a way to working with your intuition and allowing your facilitator to be intuitive back. Whereas with hypnotherapy, that mask kind of drops, the person closes their eyes, they're guided, so you can access intimate parts that would have been more locked and more guarded, which is why it's very powerful. All of that to say, there are things that you can do that are not clinical hypnotherapy in the sense of you can do them on your own, but that are the foundation of hypnotherapeutic tools. One of them being, before going to bed, ideally after meditation or breath work, if you practice any of those mindfulness tools, setting a very clear intention on a specific question that you want to wake up with clarity with. So you would really, really think of that question and the answer that you're looking for. Ideally, if you can work with a clinical hypnotherapist that does this trance state and get you to ask yourself that question and then you sleep on that, you do wake up with an incredible amount of clarity. But you can train yourself to do this on your own. And you can dream about the answer, or you can think of the answer upon waking up. It's really powerful. And the more you do it, the more you program yourself to find that answer. And I know in one of your podcasts that I listened to that really caught my attention. And that's one of the reasons I contacted you, because I love that story. You said that you had the inspiration to change the name of your podcast 1 year in during a meditation, and you had this download and you thought you needed to add the word intuition, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I love that story, and I thought, although it's through meditation, it's a very similar frame to the kind of intuitive answers you will receive during hypnotherapy. And that's not woo-woo, that's actually science. There are very tangible explanation as to why that works. You pre-program your subconscious to deliver an answer. So it's actually very, very rational in terms of the explanation. So that's one that can be done. And the other one is beautiful, beautiful. That one is, if you get a chance to do it with a practitioner and with a clinical hypnotherapist, I would say just get someone to do this with you. And it's called automatic writing. You can do it on your own, but basically you just take a pen and you make sure that you feel, I'm not going to go through the whole, but you feel the tip of the pen on the pad or the paper. You go into a breath work or trance state, and you think again of that thing only you know, or that challenge only you face, and you let your intuition answer back. And you can even do it with your non dominant hand, which is going to be even more powerful because you will draw an answer that is more based on your inner child intuition. Because your less dominant hand is the one that is more connected to your inner child. So you just will write something that may sound or feel gibberish, but when you come back out of the trance state and you look at it, and throughout the years of doing it, the movement that you see and the letters that come out of nowhere with the person, and you can see the eyelids, right? The person being in REM because the eyelids are doing those movements, and you can see the person is in REM, and you can see suddenly this unexplainable pen shifting in one direction and making sense to them when you bring them back, and you just think, wow, this is, it's hard not to call it magic, or it's hard not to think this is some kind of witchcraft. And I have to say, as a lawyer, I'm very, very skeptical, but those things just truly work, and they're beautiful. And to me, that's intuition at its core.
Yeah. I love it that you've come from where you've come from with all the legal studies and the high powered and it's all about billing hours and making money and doing it all and da 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 da. And then now looking at the other side of it, you've turned from the dark side. You've come over to the light, almost like you can see that there are other ways that this all works. And yeah, I think that's
Yes, and
beautiful.
it doesn't have to be a choice. That's perhaps relevant to talk about and certainly reassuring. I'll always like money and power, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that because I have a certain lifestyle and I have certain habits, and I love to look after myself and fitness and traveling, etc. So the reason I share that is from a place of serving our listener, because what can feel scary is to feel that you're going to have to make a choice and lose power and money and status, right? But those are very ego driven things. And what can be reassuring is to think you can continue to get that and to get it in a healthier way. So I'm really pleased to say that I've founded a business that is thriving and very successful, and I haven't had to adjust my lifestyle down, and I do it in a way that is much more loving and nurturing, and I don't feel burnout anymore. So that nuance is important to be heard, because there is an inherent fear, which is a genuine fear from very high powered men, to think, oh, if I drop into my softer side, or if I admit to my burnout, then I'm not going to have the money and the status and the power, and I'm going to lose my job. No. When I work with men, my first course of action is never to say quit your job and leave everything behind and go to a retreat. And you can continue to do what you do and learn tools to do it in a sustainable manner.
Yeah. I'm aware that we haven't got a lot of time left, but I've heard you on a podcast talk about food, and I'd like you to talk about the benefits of eating healthy and yeah, and tying it into intuition, like frequencies, things like whatever, way you go.
Well, I have unconventional views on food, so perhaps that's the men and my masculine side. But I'm a big, big meat eater, and I'm quite a proponent of a carnivore-like diet, primal diet. I'm a certified primal health coach, and the reason I mention it is because I've actually navigated period of my life with veganism or vegetarian, particularly when I was in India and I was in an ashram and I was doing my meditation training with my guru. And those were the unhealthiest time of my life. My hair was falling out, my skin was breaking out. And again, each to our own. This is not about being dogmatic. I truly respect everybody's opinion and religious background and reasons for eating a certain way. But I do believe that approaching the way you eat in a very wholesome, nature based way, and especially for men. Modern men eat an atrocious diet. Men that come to see me are men that eat like kids, And it's okay to call it out because it needs to be called out. Like, you are a grown man. You do not need to be eating that kind of crap biscuit or candy or ice cream or pizza. This is not what your ancestors ate. This is not what a hunter eats. This is not what a warrior eats, right? So think your warrior, think your hunter, and eat like one. So I eat bones, I chew bones, I make bone broth. I have gone to hunting trips. I think it's really important to have a very primal connection to your food and your environment, to go foraging, to go out in nature, to drink raw milk that comes out of a farm, to pick up eggs from a farm, to buy locally, to buy a lamb and to share it with your neighbors and put it in your massive freezer. That's what we do. To eat nose to tail. So I don't believe in wasting. I actually really love nature and love animals. And I sincerely believe that you can be a meat eater and a nature and animal lover. I don't think that's a contradiction. I think actually that's the most natural state of being. And just to remind ourselves that we are all hunters at heart. And it's when we stop nurturing that side of ourselves that we actually become weaker. And because we become weaker, we compensate with things that harm our psyche. So if you're listening to this and you're finding it a bit triggering, I would love to invite you, man, to have more primal pursuits, right? You're not designed to spend all those hours in an AC cubicle corner office environment. Go out in nature, go on an exploration, roll around naked, even in beer, in a beach, surround yourself with a tribe. We need to have those primal pursuits, and that relationship to food is so important because especially when you look at testosterone level, vitamin D level, a lot of the men that I work with are deficient, and they're deficient because they eat like crap. They're having coffees on the go filled with microplastic. They're eating out of containers filled with microplastic. They've got microplastic that can be found in the brains, in the sperm even. It's a genuine consideration. So eat like a warrior, eat like a hunter, and make sure that you choose food that is sourced from nature and not just coming out of a little plastic package. That's what I would say about food.
Excellent. Thank you. So in our final minutes, I will put all your contact details in the show notes. I have noticed there are things on your website, like a meditation and things like that, that you might want to quickly share with people that they can access for free or whatever.
Sure. So the first thing I would say is if today resonated, I would love to invite you to take my burnout assessment. It's complimentary. It's the first thing you will see on my website. So if you just go to www.charlenegisele.com, you will find my burnout assessment quiz. And it's a really great place to start because you get to understand where you're at. And if you're listening to this and it resonates, most likely somewhere on the burnout spectrum. So that would be step one. And my second gift would be to go ahead and check my show, The Charlene Gisele, for a sleepcast. So if you, again, look for it in your favorite podcast player, you will find a guided meditation. And that one, you don't want to be operating a machinery or driving because you will fall asleep.
Yeah, I put it on a couple of nights ago when I went to bed, put the headphones on, and you're right, I did go to sleep. I think it goes for half an hour or so, but I couldn't tell you what past the first couple of minutes. Excellent.
Oh, well, I appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Charlene. We'll wind up now because I know you've got to go. You've got important things to do for the day. As my day's ending, your day's starting over in France there. Thank you very much. I'm sure the men that are listening and that will listen to this in the future will they'll get a lot of benefit from it because it's from a 9 out of 10 of my guests are male. It's great to have some female energy here, but female energy that's very familiar with the male energy, and I've loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.